Hi, my name is Erin Mazursky. I'm with Grassroots Democracy. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Both my parents were Jewish, and my mom, at a very early age, decided that it was really important for me to grow up with Jewish traditions and culture. And so I started going to Hebrew school, learning about Jewish history. But the community that was most pertinent to me was my school, which was a private school in the middle of Atlanta, where I was actually, as a Jew, a minority. And so I learned from a very early age that I felt from a very early age that I was different, and that I felt like amongst my peers I constantly had to explain myself and explain why I was different from them, and through that gained a very strong sense of personal identity, but also a strong sense of feeling empathy towards others and understanding other people's views. And as a Jew, you always grow up with some kind of consciousness that the Holocaust happened, that it existed. But it wasn't until sixth grade, when I took a unit in my social studies class on the Holocaust, that I really delved into actually what happened to my ancestors and those that I had always felt like I was defending and identifying myself with to my peers. And yes, during the unit, we learned about the mass murder and we learned about the stories of the victims and the horrors of the concentration camps. But I think the lessons that were most pertinent during that class and in that time was our study of the Holocaust as a study of human hatred and what happen human bigotry and marginalization, and ultimately what happens when people who ultimately when people don't use their voice to stand up against injustice. And we learned that there were four types of actors who all had a part in the genocide. There were the perpetrators, there were the victims, there were the bystanders, and there were the righteous Gentiles. And what was most striking was that the bystanders, in fact, were the majority of the four groups. The righteous Gentiles, the ones who took Jews in, saved lives, hid them from the Nazis, were by far the fewest. And one day in class, we were asked to write a journal entry in our daily journal with the simple question, which one would you be? And I vividly remember writing in my journal and making a promise to myself then and there that I would never be a bystander. And I got the opportunity my sophomore year in college to actually live up to that promise. It was 2004 when I first learned about the ongoing genocide in Darfur, Sudan, where the government was mercilessly slaughtering people, its own people. And it was from there that it was never a question of if we should do something, but what. And so I more and more got active in. I got more and more active in the anti-genocide movement, and it quickly spread from my college campus to college campuses all over the country. And I got very active working with college students to help unify our message, to help educate each other, and make sure that we were constantly thinking of new ways to bring each other together and to think of new ideas of engaging people. And what I realized through this work was that in trying to have a voice for other people 6,000 miles away who were being mercilessly slaughtered, that we in ourselves had to find our own voice. And so I worked on this issue for 4.5 years until I actually got the opportunity to go work on the Barack Obama campaign. And it was there that I had the opportunity to sort of step back and look at what we had done over the course of 4.5 years of building a movement against genocide, and of organizing people who were not bystanders. And it was actually during the Obama campaign that I came into contact with other bright-eyed, bushy-tailed youth who maybe weren't organizing against genocide, but were using their voices to create community and empower people and teach them that teach people that they had agency in their own community, and that in creating agency we could create change one person at a time for the broader injustices that were happening, whether it was 6,000 miles away in Darfur, Sudan, or in Orlando, Florida, and suburbs of Orlando, Florida, where there was no community at first, where I was. So, it was with that I really learned the power of youth, in that youth are the ones sort of innovating. They were the backbone of the anti-genocide movement. They were the ones constantly thinking of new ideas, of realizing that they had the power on their campus communities to create a majority of bystanders. and constantly thinking of new and creative ways. But as I learned in sixth grade, youth also have the ability to be at the forefront of horror and the forefront of popularism, which led to such hatred and bigotry and marginalization that led to the Holocaust. And so it's sort of with those lessons that I carry with me today that we need to continue to empower this generation of youth to continue to think creatively, but make sure that change is well sustaining, so that in 20 years into the future, we're not looking back and saying, oh, we did that 20 years ago, that would have been nice, but so that we can continue to have a voice throughout our lives and empower people one generation at a time.